Hey adventurers, I'm Tony and today is a review for Redwall by Brian Jacques. This is the first book in the Redwall series that he wrote. I guess it's not chronological because there's other books that come before it chronologically, but this is the first book that he wrote in this world, in this series. Of course, this is a high fantasy / anthropomorphic fantasy series, as all the other books are in this series. Whatever. You understand what I'm trying to say. The age range is YA. As always, I will be following the 5 elements outline, although I'll be with this one and my other reviews of the Redwall books. They will not be quite so strict to this outline because you basically already understand most of some of the later elements that I use. But as always, I'll start off with characters. There aren't really very often main characters in this book, but there is in this one, and the main character is kind of Matthias. The story definitely focuses most heavily on Matthias and primarily follows his point of view. When we first meet him, he's a bumbling, clumsy character who is full of energy and full of excitement and a desire to serve and to help people, but also more of a warrior spirit, I guess, and I think that term would be perfectly applicable to his character. But he's not just a peace-loving, oh, everything's all good, everything's all perfect type character. He understands from the very beginning that there's things that aren't okay. He does have a lot of character development, and even though there's a lot of character development for him, there are times where his character changes rather than develops. I can't really go into that without spoilers, but there are things that you're just like, but that's not the same as it was in the beginning, and there was no progression to get to where he is now. It's just different, which is probably just mostly because this was the first book Brian Jacques ever wrote type thing. The other kind of 2 main characters, there's several other characters that you follow, but kind of the other 2 main characters would be Methuselah and Clooney the Scourge. So Methuselah is basically the wise old mentor character, and as with any wise old mentor character, he's one of the best characters in the book. He's a great friend to Matthias and a very interesting character. Oh, there's that word again, interesting, lovely. Definitely wise and besides just being wise, he's actually a very smart mouse as well, and I really enjoy the relationship that Methuselah and Matthias have, and just all the wisdom that you get from Methuselah. He's just a very good character. And then Clooney the Scourge is the main villain of the series, or of this book specifically, not the series. He's the main antagonist for the series. Sorry, I keep saying series. The main antagonist for the story. He's a fearsome warlord, very, very dangerous, and actually very, very smart, which is something that I really respect about Brian Jacques, is all his main villains are usually really smart. They're just, because of their hubris or whatever it is, there's something about them that leads to their downfall. It's no surprise that villains usually lose in these books. But Clooney is just a great foil for the creatures of Redwall. There's just his actions that he takes, the way he thinks through things. He knows certain characters are going to be able to do certain things, or he can think through and be like, oh, I should have them do this, so it'll basically cripple the inhabitants of Redwall because they're not expecting that, and it's kind of, they look up to this thing or whatever it might be. As always, there's plenty of other characters that are extremely important, but those 3 are definitely have the biggest, most important role in the book. A lot of people that I've talked to say they really, really liked Constance the Badger. She's a great character. Again, I don't think there's a character in one of Jacques' books that I could say is a bad character. Like, as in they don't have a personality, a distinct personality, and they don't have some form of character growth. There's plenty of just grunts and nobodies in the villains' hordes that usually just end up dying or whatever, and you don't get to learn much about them. But of any of the characters that actually have a role, they have all got distinct personalities. Back to Constance, she's another great character that the enemy tends to overlook and underestimate, which is not a good idea. Never a good idea to underestimate a badger in these books. Warbeak the Sparrow is great, super fun character. I don't know, I really love when there's the bird characters that Brian Jacques brings into the story sometimes are almost always some of my favorites. I do like birds though, so there is that. But Warbeak is a fun character and a super good friend. What I mean by that is not so much that Matthias and Warbeak are good friends, but more of that Warbeak, the role that she plays is a good role for the relationship that she has with Matthias. And so that's what I'm trying to say by that, if that makes any sense. Abbott Mortimer is another great character. Again, they're all great characters, but he's kind of like more of the father figure actually than Methuselah is. So he's the leader of Redwall Abbey at the time, and he knows when to let others lead, and he knows when to take control and to take charge. Cornflower is, I guess I'd describe her as a delightful character. She isn't the most prominent in this book. I don't remember if she is prominent in any other books or not. She does, again, have a distinct personality, distinct character, but we never really get to know her too much in this book. Then on to the plot. I stole this one directly offline because I couldn't come up with ones right off the bat that I needed, because it's been a while now since I finished the book again. But the plot synopsis that I stole off the internet is: the mice and other peaceful creatures of Redwall Abbey celebrate the summer of the late rose until an evil tyrant named Clooney the Scourge arrives to shatter their serenity. Clooney decides he wants Redwall for himself, and he plots with his army of vermin to destroy the current inhabitants. I thought the plot was a lot better in this than I had remembered. It's been a while since I read this book, and I think the TV show changed it a lot. So there's that. But I thought it was really well done, and there's a lot of layers to it. Okay, and now we're getting into the parts that's kind of just the same for all the Redwall books. I don't want to say the same because they're different and they're done differently and just slightly different from each other in each one. But themes, many of the same things as in all the Redwall books. Good versus evil is the obvious one. That's really the biggest book, or the biggest theme in this whole series. It's kind of the overarching theme of the series. Friendship and cooperation, again, very common for these books. No loyalty to tyrants, again, very common. The tyrant usually has control of his army because he's the most powerful. They aren't actually that loyal to him, they're scared of him. A desire for peace. The characters do desire peace. They don't really want warfare, but sometimes that's what happens and they have to deal with that. And then again, a sword is a tool. It's not the sword doesn't kill people, it's the person wielding the sword that kills people type thing. They're all good and always well presented without being too heavy-handed. World/setting. This is the first book set in the world. There are a few things that don't carry over to the rest of the series that Brian Jacques changed after he decided to write more books in the series. The primary one being that the Redwall Abbey in this book is an abbey of mice, not just all woodland creatures, although it's perfectly willing to harbor and house all woodland creatures in their times of need, but it's specifically run by mouse and inhabited by mice. The other thing that I noticed in this one, or that I knew about this one, is that this is the only book in the series that has a beaver in it, and Brian Jacques did incorporate this into. He was very purposeful when choosing to do this. He had a reason for doing that, and if you're interested in that, I can sure tell you. I've got no issues telling you. I just don't want to take the time here. For a first book in the series, it's a very well-developed world. We don't see a whole lot other than Redwall Abbey itself and a little bit of the surrounding Mossflower Wood, but you can tell that he's put some thought into how the world works for that specific area. More of it, of course, gets expounded upon in other books. Uniqueness factor is, again, anthropomorphic fantasy. It's the same as I've really said for any of the other books in this series. The magic system isn't extremely prominent in any of the books, but it does actually play quite a big role in this story. The other thing that I just now thought of for the uniqueness factor is the amount of games and riddles and things like that Brian Jacques incorporates into his world or into his stories. They basically go on treasure hunts in like every book, and it's very well done each time. Overall, I found this book a lot more enjoyable than I remembered it to be. I didn't remember loving this book as much as I love it now. It's still not my favorite, I don't think, but it's, as always, just a very charming book and series. And again, the audiobooks for this series are by far my preferred way to consume these books. I love reading them physically. They've got great maps, they've got some pretty great illustrations for the beginnings of the chapters and for even the cover art. But the maps and art that you see in the books don't I don't know, I would say that it's better to listen to the audiobooks than to see them, than to have the maps, and that's not something that I normally say. The audiobooks are just that great. The writing style, again, is very similar to the things that I've said in the other ones. It's very accessible, comprehensible. It's just, it's not too childish, and it doesn't hold your hand, but it's not like overly flowery and poetic to the point of being purple for the sake of being purple type thing. It's just simple, straightforward, straight to the point, but doesn't hold back. Overall, I think I would rate this one a 4.5 star book. I almost, going through here and trying to do the rating for it, I almost gave it a 5 star, and then it's like, no, there's a couple things that I don't quite think were perfect, so 4.5, I'm plenty happy with that. It's a good book. It's not my favorite of the series, but it's very enjoyable. So that is my review for Redwall by Brian Jacques. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for watching an Erudite Adventure. We post videos every Monday and Thursday. We have our Discord linked in the description and our Instagram. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. Stay warm.